Tori Hope Petersen, thank you so much for being here today. I love to just jump right into it and start kind of from a big macro perspective. And so you're an author, a speaker, you're a mom, a wife. I would love to hear, how would you describe the calling that God has placed on your life?
Whoa.
I come out swinging.
You come out swinging. You know, I'm going to be controversial. I'm already starting off like
it's fine.
Bumping and rubbing. Okay. Listen, I don't love the word calling. I don't love the way that we just like throw it out as Christians. I think that it can add a lot of like pressure, especially to young people. And I really believe that like when you're in your 20s, like God very well may be calling you to something very clear and very niche. But a lot of times, like, you just got to try things to figure out who you are and who God's called you to be and what he's called you to do. And so when it comes to my calling, I really feel like God has given me a lot of different opportunities, like you said, to speak and to write and to be an author. But I know that that is part of who God has called me to be. But at the same time, I feel very called and convicted to love my neighbor right where I am, and show up in places that aren't necessarily platformed or that no one sees or very few people see. My husband and I are foster parents, and the children that we foster, that's not something we always publicly share. The people that we have in our home, caring for them, that are often underserved, isn't something that we often share necessarily on social media, but it's something we do day in and day out. And so all that to say, I think calling is so complex. And so I say that I actually have a tattoo that says, my vocation is love. And I'm answering it that way because I think for so long I got kind of freaked out and scared. Like, am I doing what God's called me to do? Am I doing this right? And maybe I think I was pigeonholing myself. And when I gave myself the freedom to realize that like God has just called me to love right where I am with what I have. And sometimes that's on a stage, and sometimes that's behind my computer typing with no one else. And sometimes that's around my table with my neighbors. I think it just gave me the freedom to show up in many different spaces and places with the gifts that God has given me to serve God's people.
Now, what's beautiful about that is that it's an essence of being versus an essence of doing. And so I think that there are a lot of leaders who are listening who feel like they have to be doing something for God, or they have to be like it's very task oriented. How do you fight the temptation to be task oriented so that you can love clearly?
Oh, well, I am very task oriented. I try not to be. And one of the ways that I do that is I try to remind myself, like I have like phrases or scripts. I call them scripts.
Yeah, we call them stickies in my house. Stickies.
Yeah, you kind of have to like function from them. Like you remind yourself of them. And so one of those is just, my time is not my own. My time is God's. It does not belong to me. And so I love a good checklist. I like every day I like to accomplish things. I'm a very accomplish driven person. However, when someone shows up at my door, or when we get a call to take a child in or do respite for a foster family who's extremely overwhelmed, there are some things, oftentimes we have to drop the checklist for what we know God is moving us towards. And that I am like anyone else. I'm human. I am like, oh my gosh, I just want to get these other things done. Like I just want to get my checklist done because it feels good. But to just remind myself, my time is not my own. It is God's. And of course, you have to do that when you're a mom, when you're a parent, when you're a dad. And I think that's another reason why calling is so conflicted for me as well. Why I've had some conflict with that term is because, people will say like, your calling is to be a mom, like period. And especially in Christian spaces. And if you do anything else, sometimes you can be looked at as bad, or one calling can be maybe looked at as less than the other. But we're called to be witnesses of God's love in our lives. We're called to be disciples, and we're called to love our neighbor. And sometimes, like, I just think when we get so wrapped up in like, this is my one calling, we lose out on everything that God has for us.
All right. So let me ask you this, because we're internet friends now. How would you ask that first question that I asked in a way that would be more open to a general response? So the question I asked was, how would you describe the calling that God has placed on your life? And I've done a lot of podcasts, and I loved your response. What word would you use instead of calling? Help me be better.
No, I think it's fine.
And I'm not saying that I was bad. I'm just saying, like, what's another way to say it in a way that gets to that answer for more people?
Yeah. Well, no, and I don't think that your question is bad. I just answer it the way I do because I want to give people freedom to explore their calling, and I want to give people freedom to understand their calling as more than like niche, more than a word or a phrase. I don't think you asked it wrong. I just think sometimes as Christians we perceive
There's
it
a lot of baggage on the word.
In a way, isn't it?
There is.
I feel like there can be, especially for women. I'm just already being controversial.
No, it's fine.
Especially for women, is we are told like your calling is to be a wife and a mom. Absolutely. I love being a wife and a mom, and it is a part of my calling. But God has also called many of us women to other things as well. And so I don't think it's that you asked it wrong. I just answer it the way I do because I want to give everyone the freedom to see their calling as God sees it. And I think not as the world sees it, or not as like these Christian bubbles kind of push us into something that maybe is not the most glorifying to God. There's a chapter about this in my, I have a whole chapter about this in my book. I actually thought you were asking, another thing is I thought you were asking because I thought you were like wanting to get the answer from my book because I wrote about it.
Well, so the whole book is about this essence of lies, right? Like, and I was kind of working my way there, but so I ask the same question for every podcast, right? Like I do an anchor question at the front and I do an anchor question in the back. And that's kind of the deal. And every once in a while, I will bump up against the baggage from the word calling. And you described it so beautifully. And I thought to myself, man, I wonder if there's another way to say it that would be more inclusive or complete. So that's a me issue. That's not a you issue necessarily.
No,
but like,
I don't even think it's a you issue.
I'm just thinking like there's got to be like, how would you describe what God is doing in this season of your life? That maybe that's a better, more easier, softer way. Like I don't like the word does have baggage. Where did these lies come from? Like I get it that it's like, and this is the essence of the book, right? It's breaking dysfunction. It's breaking kind of these cyclical kind of nature beliefs. And one of the things that came to me was like it's cultural theology that we're kind of breaking through.
Yes.
So I don't know, where does all this stuff, where's it born out of?
Oh, that's a good question. Where is this stuff born out of? Well, I think it's born out of leaders who often say what they've been told. I don't know if I know the exact origins, but what I think of right away is I had a friend in college, and when I initially met her, her name was Alexa, and I just thought she was like perfect in every single way. But then found out that her dad was actually an alcoholic, and so we connected, right? Because we both had like these broken homes and these broken backgrounds, and we started to be really close. And then her dad tried to actually detox on his own. Wow. And he passed away through his detox. And so when I was in college, my job was to watch the weight room. It wasn't a real job. I just did homework, but I was paid for it. So I was doing my job. I was an athlete in college. That was all of the athletes' jobs, to watch the weight room.
Sure.
I was watching the weight room, and she comes out of her classroom. There were classrooms like around the weight room where it was. And she comes out of her classroom and she just falls into my arms and she starts falling. I knew that her dad had passed away. Um, and I I looked at her and she was telling me like, this is just so painful. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this. This is so hard. And I looked at her and I said, Alexa, you just need to trust God. And I, and she just, I think back to that moment and I'm still like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have said that. She literally just like it was like her tears just became bigger. She like screamed. She was like so hurt by what I said. And she just like crumbled into my arms. I was holding her like she was a baby. I mean, she was just devastated. And she said, Tori, my dad just died. And I was like, oh, yeah, he did. Like, and I didn't say anything else because I realized I didn't know what to say. But I realized I said that because that's what had been said to me when things were hard. You know, I grew up in the foster care system. I have so much trauma and there was so much baggage that we can call it baggage or hurt or pain, whatever, that I brought into the church. And what I was told is like, you need to trust God, you need to pray harder, and the trauma will be wiped away and your pain will be no more. And so that's how I came to learn who God was. Now I know that God is not a God of shallow maxims. He is not a God of, band-aids that say, just trust me. He wants to meet us at the root and he wants to walk with us through our pain. But I say that story because I think it starts with just people who've went before us and who have said something that we've then taken and thought, okay, like, that was a good leader and I want to be a good Christian leader. So I'm just going to kind of pass this on. And we don't realize that it's not working until it doesn't work. We don't realize oftentimes that it's hurtful until it's hurtful for ourselves or until we hurt someone else in that way. And so I think, the only way that we can really, I love that you asked, Tony, like, I love that you asked, like, how can I ask that differently? Because I think that's kind of the way that we trudge through it is we ask one another, how did that hurt you? How do I do this differently? How do I do this better? And then we as leaders remain humble and able to receive feedback, not defensive.
If you were to go back in time and redo that entire encounter with Alexa, how would you do it differently?
I think I just hold her and not really say much at all. I think I would have just cried with her and said, yeah, this is really hard and this is really unfair. And it's like your dad was trying to do the right thing and didn't work out, and I'm sorry. And I think I would have just sat with her and let her say whatever she needed to say and listen. Maybe not say much at all, but just listen. When I think about the people who have helped me through the worst parts of my life, they were oftentimes good listeners and good question askers. They helped me, by asking good questions, kind of helped guide me to my own conclusions of what I needed to do. So maybe I'd ask her, what do you need? And sometimes when people are in trauma, they don't know what they need. So you have to give them options. Or, can I walk you back to your dorm? Because she was like falling in front of everybody, And so I think just giving her what she needs, walking with her and not trying to fix it. Sometimes that's what we need, because her dad passing, the pain of that will never necessarily be buttoned up and fixed by a human,
Yeah.
in the way that we think it can. But I do think community is healing. And so just being there for her quietly was probably would have been more helpful.
I love what you said. You used the phrase shallow maxims about God. And I think that's, first of all, I love that. I could meditate on that for a while. Here's the thing about shallow maxims in my life is that I didn't know I was using them most of the time. And how do we begin to do the work of parsing through what's real and what's just handed down cultural theology or things that may not be helpful in the moment? How do we begin to kind of like, or is the only way to do that by inadvertently hurting people and not doing the right things, and then just taking your lumps and kind of repenting might be too strong of a word, but like making adjustments? How do we do it without making a bunch of things more painful?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think we feel it. It's especially easy to recognize when we feel it in our own pain. So when we go through, there's that phrase like love like you've never been hurt, right? And when we function from that, like love like you've never been hurt, the idea is like we put our hurt aside and then we just continue on. But I think that oftentimes our hurt it can give us knowledge, it can give us wisdom. Our baggage and our pain can be like a superpower if we allow it to be. We were talking before this for the people who don't know, and I live in my hometown that I grew up in, and I grew up in actually a trailer park in my hometown, and it feels really strange to live in my hometown. I love it. I love my hometown girl, like forever. But it feels strange living in my hometown, living a very different life than how I grew up. And so I tried to, I think, as I said, do the work that is sometimes unseen of serving the vulnerable and letting people into my home, because I always want to stay connected to that. I don't want to lose it because it's made me who I am. And also I believe that it's a calling of what God has called us all to in some capacity. And so I grew up in a trailer park, and one day I was at a prayer meeting at my church. I did not work for my church. It was just like, I think sometimes when people have my job, they think that everyone works for the church. I don't work for the church in any capacity. It was just like a prayer meeting, praying for the community. And so I went to that, and my pastor was like, we are praying, we pray for the people of the trailer park, that the problem that's happening will be resolved. And I just like stopped, and I was like, wait, what's happening in the trailer park? And he said, their water has been shut off.
Oh, wow.
And he said their water's been shut off. They don't drink water. They can't shower. They can't go to the bathroom. And I was like, wait, well, why? And he said that their water, because they hadn't taken care of their plumbing, that it was because it's privately owned, and the owner had not taken care of the plumbing, and it was hurting the people in the trailer park. And then it was like spreading into other plumbing in the city, and possibly like going to hurt other people. And so they just shut it off. And I was like, whoa, like what's happening? And like, that's like something that happens in developing countries, is like happening across town. And so I called the mayor, and I was like, how can we help? Can our family do? And he gave me the number to the manager. So different than the owner, different than the person who's not taking care of the issue. And I called the manager, and she didn't want to talk to me. She was like, we're going to get it fixed. And I was like, oh, I'm not like a government official. Like, I'm not telling you need to get it fixed. I'm just here to help. Like, can we bring clean water? Can we bring cups? Can we like pay for porta potties to be there? Like, what do you need? And she was like, no, we don't need anything. Like, I'm fine. And I was like, she was like about to hang up the phone. And I was like, I just need to tell you that I actually grew up in this trailer park, and I know how hard it is to people talk about the people there very badly. I was like, I know how hard it is, and I really want to help you. And you could like feel her walls like just like fall down over the phone. And she said, we need drinking water. Like, I just need lots of bottles of water. And I was like, done. Like, I'm going to go get pallets, and I'm going to bring them to you. And it's just such a testimony of how our pain can be used as a superpower if we let it, how our past and the things that we've went through and our hurt can help other people for good. And so I say all this because I think how we learn is we don't push down, right? Like the pain, we don't push down feelings. I know another like maxim in the church right now is like, feelings aren't facts. And like, no, feelings are not facts. And sometimes feelings, we can't always let them be our leaders. However, like God did give us feelings. Jesus had feelings.
Yeah.
And so they're there for some reason. And so I think we need to be very careful not to shut down like our past, our baggage, our pain, our hard feelings, because when we work through them, they're actually the tool that we can use to help other people work through their own pain.
Yeah. One of the things I say all the time is that feelings are decision points. They're not decision makers.
Mm.
Like this, but it's really important that you feel them, or else you're in big trouble, right? Like if you don't deal with your feelings, eventually your feelings will deal with you. Like they're always they're coming for real,
so
usually hot.
Yeah.
I love creative processes, and so first of all, your book is beautiful, like the cover and just the way it's kind of designed, and but I'm interested in the process of writing through the lies.
Yeah.
Right. It's different than most. And as a podcaster, I get a lot of books, and in this particular case, you kind of, you just tackle each chapter as a lie. How did you tell me about the creation of that process?
Okay, first I want to say thank you about the book cover. That was such a process. I came up with the concept. It's supposed to be kintsugi art, and for anyone
It's
that
that's my lights room.
yes,
Yeah. So like it's the tell everybody what kintsugi art is.
So kintsugi art is Japanese, I believe, form of art, and the idea is like when a bowl or when something precious like breaks, that you don't just throw it away, but you actually put it back together with gold. And the idea of it is that its brokenness makes it more valuable. Its brokenness does not make it less valuable, but it makes it more valuable. And yeah, that's one of the ideas of the book, is that like, and what I just said about the story in the trailer park, like our
It's
brokenness,
a perfect example. Yeah.
Yes, our brokenness makes us more valuable. But there are patterns and cycles that we need to break oftentimes, especially when we're coming from a family of dysfunction, or a home origin of dysfunction. And so there are patterns within those broken pieces on the book. And it took us a long time to get that concept. So thank you. I also love the cover. In the creative process for the lies, like those are just the lies of the chapter, are literally the lies that, I mean, have just swirled around in my mind. Some background on me for people who are listening and don't know. I grew up in the foster care system. Before that, I lived with my biological mother, who was a single mom, and she had a lot of trauma and pain passed down to her. And I truly believe my mom did the absolute best with what she had. Like my mom loves me, and there's nothing more than what my mom wanted me to be successful. She wanted me to be an educated woman. She told me that from a very young age, and she always, she did her best, but she had so much trauma and pain. So I eventually went into the foster care system, aged out, to move throughout 12 different homes. And so those lies really come from abandonment. They come from just broken relationships. They come from lies spoken over me. They come from patterns that were passed down to me generationally. And what I haven't noticed in myself is, right, in other people, we have these generational patterns, and then they are, and we're like, I want to do something. I was like, I want something different for my own family, and I'm going to do whatever I have to do that. But then I was like, I actually don't know how. And everybody teach me. And so, yeah, maybe I was like doing something different, but it was like those generational patterns, they bled into kind of thought patterns, which are the lies. And then those thought patterns become behavioral patterns that maybe don't look the same exact way as when you grew up, but they're just like a different variation of numbing, of dysfunction, of pain. And so the lies, the creative process of that was simply, those are truly the lies that have swirled around in my head and that I have had to battle and combat for as long as I can remember, really, from being a teenager.
I love when leaders are vulnerable, and I think that leading from that kind of authentic place is so crucial. And yet, I also acknowledge that in my past, at least, I have been one of those people that tend to be an oversharer, right? Like too soon, like, hey, Tony, too soon. Just keep that, maybe just keep that to yourself a little while longer. And so there's a lot of leaders who are listening who are communicators and they're leading groups of people. Give us your best wisdom on when is the right time to share wounds and pain, and when are you not ready?
So complex. I have heard, don't share until it's a testimony. Don't share until God brings you the other side. Um, and then I have heard, you have to share when you're in the midst of it, because that's how you have people, you're going to walk alongside people that way. And that's how you're going to get through it. And that's how you're going to help other people get through what they're going through. And so I really do believe that it is like case by case basis. But here, what I function from
Yeah, I love it.
is what I say is I want to share from a place of healing, not from a place of hurting. If we share from a place of hurting, we're going to hurt others. If we share from a place of healing, we're going to heal others. And so maybe you're not at the other end of the testimony. Maybe you have not come to this place of victory or complete healing, but you are in the process of healing. So if I would have shared, and I will say, actually, I have shared my story during times when I had not forgiven my mom and when I didn't understand the full scope of what my mom had been through. And I think that probably hurt some people who maybe grew up like my mom or who have been in the position of my mom. But when I have understood like the full scope of what my mom has went through and understood that she's like really tried her best and went through my own healing journey, I can share my story. And I think it gives grace and understanding to people in my mom's position. And so I think that's just a very practical example of how sharing can hurt people, how sharing can heal people. And my mom has always given me permission to share our story. She's never really given me any boundaries or constraints. So it's not necessarily, when you have that, it's not necessarily hurting the person that you're sharing about, but it can still hurt people like them.
That's a good word. One of the things that you do in the introduction is you talk about buying your home there in Ohio, the great state of Ohio, by the way. So we're both Ohioans.
OH.
Let's go.
Let's go.
I was going to, anyway, let's keep going. This is much more important than Ohio State football. But so in the introduction, you talk about buying the home that you bought. You kind of come back to Ohio, you buy this home, and about creating a safe place. I'm wondering, can you share that story? I thought it was a beautiful introduction to the work that you kind of call us to and the importance of having a safe place. Can you kind of paint that picture for us and maybe give us a little insight, like if there's a leader listening who doesn't feel like they have that place and isn't in a position yet to go buy a new home? That half joking on that, but like, you know what I mean?
Yes. So in my first book, there was a quote that I wrote, when it's all said and done, I don't hope to be known as a powerhouse. I want to be known as a safe house. And that quote kind of went viral. It's like my most quoted quote as an author. And so in my second book, in the introduction, I talk about how me and my husband, we bought this 100-year-old duplex. We bought it without an inspection. It was on the market for
10 minutes.
Year.
You bought it in 10 minutes.
Yes, we put an offer on it. After 10 minutes, our realtor literally thought we were psychotic. We may be. And we just loved it. It was an old house. So I wanted a home that had a minimum of 4 bedrooms. We knew we wanted to do foster care and hosting, and having people in our home is very, very important to me, because really that is how I have come to Christ, is people allowing me in their home and welcoming me in. Like truly what, there's that scripture, that Jesus, I was a stranger, but you welcomed me. And that I can truly say about people. And that is ultimately how I came to Christ. I was a stranger and people welcomed me in and loved me. And that's what we want to be to other people. So I was like, we need to have like a minimum of 4 bedrooms. We have 2 biological kids. And then my biological sister was going to be moving in with us. And so my husband was like, okay, well, I want like a duplex or like a multi-family home. So then one can be like a stream of income. And he had a brother who was doing that. And he was like, that's a really good idea. We should do that. And I was like, we're not going to find a 4 bedroom like 4 bedroom on each side, multi-family home. It's not happening. And then I was on Zillow. Shout out to Zillow. They should sponsor this podcast because we're just like giving them a shout out. But I was on Zillow and I just put in that filter: 4 bedrooms and a multi-family home. And there was one home that popped up, and we went to go look at it. It was a duplex, 4 bedrooms on each side. It would needed a lot of work, but it was beautiful. And so we got it. And me and my husband were in a place of we were just coming out of a lot of pain ourselves. And so I think we were running away from the pain. And then we were running into this new place. And we're like, this is going to be our safe place. And we're going to make this a safe house for ourselves and for other people. And I use this analogy in the book because the idea is that when we break these dysfunctional patterns or these hurtful patterns, whether it's hurtful to us or whether it's hurtful to others, that we become a safe house for ourselves. We become a safe house for other people. And ultimately, that it's an idea of like God is our ultimate safe house. And so when we can break these dysfunctional patterns down and find freedom in Him, we find that like God is leading us home to Himself.
That's good. I'm curious, with the amount of people that come in and out of your life because of the ministry that you do, and also you have a public life because of your author speaker life, and then you have a private life that's like real life, like the rest of life. How do you discern who's the right people to have in your circle? Like, how do you find your people?
Oh my God, you asked such good questions. Okay. Oh, how do I discern? Well, I think people in my work should always have people around them that see them as ordinary.
Amen.
That's really important. And then how do I discern who to have in my life? I think that's, I will say, I really like to try really hard not to be a person of exclusion.
Yeah.
I think exclusivity is, I should say inclusivity is very important to me. In terms of like just not, I don't mean like, and when I say inclusivity, I mean like making sure people aren't left out.
Yeah.
And I know that I can't do that perfectly because I'm a limited person. I'm a limited human being. And so, I would say like how I discern who I let into my life is such an interesting question because I will say I think I let everyone into my life a lot for a long time. And I'm actually figuring out how to walk away from some people. Like that's actually like the lesson that I have been learning the past 3 years.
Yeah.
How to let some people go. And that be not a thing. So when people walked away from me in my childhood, I perceived it as abandonment.
Oh, sure.
And so to let friendships go or to kind of transition out of relationships was really challenging for me because I thought, am I abandoning this person? Am I like, it felt like I was like causing trauma. And really that was like, I was actually just trying to avoid pain because it reminded me of my childhood. And so I think there's a constant influx of discerning who's in my life and who's not in my life and how close they are and how not close they are. But a lot of that is just like what's natural. Right. Like I'm a mom, and so I'm gonna have a lot of mom friends. I'm in ministry, so I have people who understand doing ministry work.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm a foster parent, and being like those things are really unique, right? Like being a foster parent, being in ministry. So I have foster parent friends who understand what's that like. Um, and then I think there's different variations of like different levels in which you let people in, right? So maybe I would say I'm a pretty inclusive person, but not everyone knows like the depths of like Tori.
Yeah.
So that would probably be like my family, my adoptive family. Eventually, for people who don't know my story, I eventually was adopted by my track coach, and then I have a mother figure who just lives down the street from me, and I visit her almost every night. She's my best friend, and so yeah, I think honestly, for me, it's what comes natural. I don't have the capacity to. Um, I think understanding and accepting that I'm limited has really helped. Like that's
Hmm.
another kind of one of my phrases or like scripts. Like I'm limited and I can't love everybody, let everybody in to the capacity that I would absolutely love to. I'm not God. Um, but I can love who is in front of me and like what comes naturally. And oftentimes that's the people who show up, I guess, when you ask, and the people that ask for you to show up. Yeah, that's probably not that great of a discernment tactic, but that's been my way because I
I
don't
don't
have
know.
the
I think
capacity.
I hear authenticity in all of that, right? And just acknowledging that different people have different access.
Mm,
I always say that I've got like
yes.
internet friends, and then I
Mm-hmm.
have role friends, like friends because of the role that I play in their life or the role that they play in my life.
Yes.
And then I
Yeah.
have a very small group of real friends,
Mm-hmm.
like the
Yep.
people that it doesn't matter how I
Exactly.
show up. Like it's like, that's the person's house you can go over to when you haven't brushed your teeth yet. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you're just kind of rolling in, and like, so internet and roll and real. And then I have like this in my head. It's like the Justice League table from the council. I call it the Council of the Godly, right? And so like the godly men and women in my life who I like,
Yes.
they speak truth, but they don't actually know each other. So I just go to them for different roles. Like
Yes.
there's a godly person who I talk to about my money, and a godly person I talk to about writing or
Yeah.
podcasting or whatever.
That's
And
good.
so then I have my council of the godly. But I'm always, when people are surrounded by people, and when we, like, peopling is hard.
Yeah, people get stuck. I'm a flaming extrovert, so
Same, obviously.
so peopling is hard sometimes, but it actually I just love it. I love being around people. It gives me so much energy. Um, but yeah, that's really it. What and that changes season to season. Like there are
Yeah.
friends that I'll be super close to in a season. Um, and then if their life changes or my life changes, it's not that our friendship is like gone, but maybe like I become closer to another friend. And so yeah, I think it's oftentimes what comes. I think authenticity is really important to me. I try not to force things. I've also experienced, and I read about this in my new book as well, when I have been someone who tries to like force and push relationships. That's also like that not walking away, not knowing when to let go. And usually like relationships implode when we do
Yeah.
that. Like relationships
Sure.
don't work out or they fizzle out. And there's not like good closure. And so I've just um for the last few years functioned from the place of like not wanting to force things and walking in the authenticity in relationships.
So good. Okay. So I know my podcast family loves to pray. Like we're a group of prayers. How can we pray for this book as it enters the wilderness? Like, what's your prayer for the book, and
Oh,
how can we come alongside you?
oh, thank you for asking. So I think that patterns are they're very subtle in our lives.
Hmm.
They're very quiet. They're oftentimes what we've always functioned from. Like they're not, we can usually just live with them, not a big deal. And so my my prayer is that people get the book, even if they don't know. Like people have to get this book even if they don't know their patterns, because that's the point of it, is it's like, it's going to show them, it's going to
Sure.
reveal them. And then my prayer and hope is that people see themselves for who they truly are through the book. And that is ultimately a loved child of God. So, we can know that, like we can hear it, but we don't necessarily know how to walk it out and believe it for ourselves. Maybe we believe it for everybody else, but we don't think it's true for ourselves. And so my prayer is that people see that and find that to be true for themselves through the book.
That's so good. Okay, I have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I know that the podcast fam is going to want to connect with you all over the interwebs. Where is the best place to learn all things Tori?
I'm most active probably on Instagram. I'll have a TikTok and Facebook too, if you're on that. I'm most active on Instagram, and my handle is Tori Hope Petersen, just my name. And Petersen is S-E-N, not S-O-N.
That's important. And we'll link to that in the show notes, of course. We'll put all that in there. So, okay, last question I love to ask people. It's an advice question. I'm going to invite you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, except I get to name the season of life that you're in.
Okay.
And I want to take you back to the morning of your wedding day. The morning of your wedding day. So there you are. It's a beautiful morning. Love is on the horizon. And if you could go back in time and talk to that younger version of yourself and sit knee to knee with her, hold her hands and look her deeply in the eyes, what's the one piece of advice you're going to give her on the journey she's about to go on?
I would tell her that God has given her a very different story than the people that are about to surround her. But that does not make her less than. It does not make her faith less valuable. And I would tell her to keep hold of her childlike faith, that it doesn't have to, her faith and her relationship with God doesn't have to look like the smartest theologians or the best Christian speakers and authors. Her relationship with God is unique to her. And I tell her to remain childlike, and to not worry so much about being mature in the faith or adult-like in the faith. But yeah, to remain childlike, remain in wonder of God and his father, that daughter, stay in that father-daughter relationship. And I would say that because I would say that I fell out of it for a few years, and it was really, really hard. And that was the season that I fell out of it.
Wow. And amen. Tori, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today and your heart and your writing. And, I would love, if there's anything I can do to help you when you have your next book come out, I would love to continue our conversation. Whatever I can do to support what God's doing in your life, please let me know.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for being someone who asked such good questions. This was a really, genuinely awesome podcast to be on.
Thank you.